In her 20s, her beauty opened every door. She tasted luxury, rejected good men, and believed true love could wait. But Lagos does not wait for anyone. Now in her 30s, she's chasing the very heart she once mocked, only to find silence where suitors once stood. Just when she thought she had found one last chance at real love, a gentle man who spoke softly and stayed close. He vanished without a trace. What he left behind shattered everything she hoped for. And what Loveth discovered on that final night changed her life forever. At 24, Loveth walked through Lagos like the city itself bent to admire her. Her caramel skin shimmered under the afternoon sun, her hair perfectly styled, every step deliberate, almost regal. She didn't notice the whispers, the lingering glances, or the occasional gasp of admiration. She only knew that attention followed her like a shadow, and she liked it that way. Her friends adored her, some with genuine warmth, others with envy. Saad, her closest confidant, often watched her in awe. "Loveth, do you even realize how much everyone wants to be near you?" Saad asked once as they sipped smoothies in Lekki. Loveth smirked, twirling a strand of hair around her finger. "Of course I know. It's called being exceptional, Saad. Some people were born to lead, others to follow. It wasn't arrogance. It was confidence built from years of validation. Compliments came easily, gifts arrived constantly, and admirers never seemed to run out. Yet, despite all this, Loveth rejected them all. The boys from her neighborhood, the young men from her university, even John, who had always been kind and sincere, were dismissed with a polite but firm, "No, thank you." "They're not on my level," she told Saad one day while strolling through Victoria Island. "I don't want a boy who can't keep up with me. I want someone who understands me, who gives without me asking, who knows what I want before I do." She didn't realize that the older men she sought, men in boardrooms, men with money and wives elsewhere, were not looking for love. They were looking for amusement, a fleeting thrill, someone to admire them in return. Still, for Loveth, they represented everything she wanted. Luxury, status, power. The attention of these men made her feel alive, validated, untouchable. Her life was a whirlwind of parties, rooftop bars, fashion shows, and brunches in Lekki. Every weekend, she attended events where every camera seemed to turn toward her. Photos of her in stunning outfits circulated on Instagram and WhatsApp groups. She was trending. She was admired. She was celebrated. And yet, beneath the glamour, a subtle emptiness lingered. It was invisible to those around her, hidden behind the laughter and confidence. But sometimes at night, when the city lights twinkled outside her apartment window, she felt a flicker of something she didn't want to name. Loneliness. One evening, while sipping wine at a private party in Banana Island, Loveth watched a young man nervously approach her. He held a single rose, his hands shaking. "Hi, I've admired you for a long time," he said softly. Loveth tilted her head, studying him. He was polite, kind, genuine. Good man. And yet, she smiled, gentle but dismissive. "I'm flattered," she said, "but I don't think we're a match." He nodded, hiding his disappointment. "I understand. Thank you anyway." As he walked away, she didn't feel guilt. She felt excitement, knowing she had the freedom to choose, the power to reject, the world at her fingertips. Later, she confided in Saad, laughing. "He was nice but predictable. I need someone interesting. Someone experienced. Someone older." Saad frowned. "Older men, Loveth. Most of them are married or, you know." "I know," Loveth interrupted, sipping her wine. I like men who know what they want, who can take care of me properly. I deserve nothing less." And so, her 20s unfolded in a rhythm of attention, choice, and subtle danger she didn't recognize. Gifts came, dinners were arranged, messages flooded her phone. Every man wanted a piece of her time, her beauty, her approval. Yet, with each interaction, the older men's intentions remained a mystery. Some smiled too long, lingered too close, or gave compliments that felt rehearsed. But Loveth, wrapped in her own pride, ignored the subtle signs. She was untouchable, or so she thought. As the months passed, she began to feel the first hints of change. Not in her beauty, not in her allure, but in the attention. Some admirers grew distant. Others married. And the young men she had scorned. Many moved on, some abroad, some settled with younger women. Still, she clung to the belief that she could have anyone, that the city would bend for her, that time was hers. On a humid evening in Ikoyi, as she walked past the bustling street markets, a young boy tripped over a pothole and nearly collided with her. He apologized profusely. Loveth smiled politely but felt a pang of what? Recognition. Regret. No, just a fleeting thought she dismissed. Time was moving whether she noticed or not. By the time she reached 29, subtle cracks began to appear. Invitations decreased. Gifts slowed. Men she had admired disappeared into their own lives, leaving her with the echo of her own choices. Weddings of friends became torturous reminders. She watched them tie the knot, their hands held tight, their laughter easy. And she realized something she hadn't felt before. Urgency. Desperation even. She tried reconnecting with John, the one she had dismissed so many years ago. The call was brief. The answer was polite, distant and final. I've moved on, Loveth. I think you should too. It was the first rejection she had faced that wasn't tinged with politeness or hope. Her heart, once untouched by disappointment, now throbbed with an unfamiliar ache. And in that moment, as Lagos hummed outside her apartment window, Loveth had a terrifying realization. She could no longer rely on beauty alone. Time did not wait. Men she had chased and rejected would not return. Opportunities she had squandered could not be reclaimed. The days after John's rejection felt heavier than Loveth expected. She tried to brush it off, telling herself that plenty of men still wanted her. But when she opened her Instagram DMs, the messages felt different. No more eager businessmen promising trips to Dubai. No more "hey beautiful" from men she once ignored. Just the occasional compliment, mostly from boys too young to matter, and random strangers she couldn't take seriously. Lagos was still loud, busy, and intoxicating, but for the first time, Loveth felt invisible inside it. Saad noticed before Loveth admitted it. "You're quiet these days," Saad said one afternoon as they sat in a cafe in Yaba, the type of place Loveth once considered beneath her. "What's going on?" Loveth forced a smile. "Nothing. I'm just thinking about stuff. About John." Loveth's silence was answer enough. Saad reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Babe, life moves. You will meet someone better." Loveth wanted to believe that, but something deeper gnawed at her. Fear. A fear she hadn't felt before. A fear she couldn't say out loud. What if her time was running out? She shook her head, unwilling to dwell on it. "Let's go out tonight," she said suddenly. "I need a distraction." Saad raised a brow. "Like clubbing?" "Yes. Why not?" "Outside." "Fine. But Loveth, don't do anything desperate." Loveth laughed lightly, dismissing the warning. "I'm Loveth. I don't do desperate." But she did. That night, she wore a shimmering gold dress that hugged her curves and caught every light in the club. She walked in with the same confidence she had always carried, expecting attention to rush toward her the moment she appeared. Didn't. People glanced, yes, but not with the same hungry admiration she once commanded. Some looked at her then looked away. Few nodded politely. One man she had flirted with months earlier walked right past her without recognition. Felt like a slap. Saad noticed her stiffened posture and leaned close. "Breathe. You're still the baddest girl here." But Loveth didn't feel like the baddest anything. She moved toward the bar to steady herself. That was when she saw him, the gentle man. The one who would later vanish. The one who would leave a mark on her life greater than any man before him. He stood at the far end of the bar, dressed simply in a white shirt and dark jeans. Nothing extraordinary. No designer watch. No chain. No aura of wealth. But something about him was different. Calmness. Softness. A stillness that pulled her in. Sod followed her gaze. You like him? Loveth shrugged, but her eyes remained locked on him. He looks honest. Honest? Sod laughed. That's new. Shut up, Loveth said, but she was smiling. She walked toward him, not with the arrogance of her 20s, but with a quiet curiosity she barely recognized. When he turned and their eyes met, he smiled, warm, gentle, almost relieved. Hi, he said softly, as though he had known her long before tonight. I've seen you here before. You have? Loveth asked, a little surprised. Yes. You always walk in like you own the place. But tonight you looked like you needed someone to check on you. Loveth blinked slowly. No man had ever seen through her facade so easily. What's your name? She asked. Michael, he said. And you? Loveth. Beautiful name, he said, and it didn't sound rehearsed. Sounded sincere. They talked. For minutes. For an hour. For longer than she expected. He wasn't flashy or loud. He didn't brag. He didn't try to impress. He listened. He asked questions. He was different. Sod watched them from across the club with a knowing smile. By the time the night ended, Michael asked for her number. Loveth hesitated, not because she didn't want to give it, but because she didn't know why he made her nervous. I'll call you, he said before she could second-guess herself. Not tonight. Tomorrow. He kept his promise. The next day Michael called. And the next. And the next. His presence became a steady rhythm in Loveth's life. Soft, patient, consistent. Unlike the men who came and went like shadows, he stayed close. And Loveth, though cautious, began to let him in. But beneath the sweetness of new affection, something else lingered. Silence. Secret. A feeling Loveth couldn't name yet. Something about Michael didn't fully add up. Something that would eventually unravel everything. Something that would lead directly to the night he vanished. The following week, Loveth couldn't stop thinking about Gabriel. His calm, measured demeanor had unsettled her in the most unexpected way. In her prime, she had been accustomed to men chasing her, their voices loud, their intentions often shallow. Gabriel was different. He had a quiet persistence that spoke volumes without words, and for the first time, she felt a sense of curiosity that bordered on vulnerability. It was Saturday morning when he called. Would you like to meet at the pier around 6? His voice was soft, deliberate, and it sent a shiver of anticipation through her. Loveth glanced at her reflection in the mirror. She was 30 now. Her beauty still undeniable but seasoned with a maturity that her 20s had never required. She nodded to herself and agreed. The day stretched slowly. Loveth wandered through Lekki Market, picking up small gifts for herself, a delicate bracelet, a leather-bound journal. The vendors greeted her warmly, recognizing a familiar face, but her mind was elsewhere. Every street, every corner seemed to whisper a question she didn't yet know the answer to. Could she trust herself again? Could she trust a man? By the time evening arrived, the sun had begun its descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Gabriel was already waiting at the pier, leaning casually against the railing. When their eyes met, a subtle smile passed between them. It was not the overtly flirty smile she was used to, but it carried depth, sincerity, and a promise of something more. They walked along the pier, the gentle lapping of water beneath them a soothing soundtrack to their conversation. Gabriel listened intently, his eyes reflecting interest and a quiet patience. Loveth found herself sharing pieces of herself she had kept hidden for years, regrets, small vulnerabilities, and stories of her past choices. With each word, she felt a strange sense of relief. It was as if the city, with all its noise and chaos, had momentarily disappeared, leaving only the two of them. I've never met anyone quite like you, Gabriel said finally, his voice low. You carry yourself with confidence, but there's also a fragility I can't ignore. It makes you human. Loveth laughed softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Fragile. I don't think I'm fragile. I've spent my life making sure no one can touch me. But sometimes, he said, looking out at the lagoon, the things we protect ourselves from are the very things we need the most. His words lingered, embedding themselves in her thoughts. She knew he was right, but pride and habit made it difficult to admit. Still, there was a spark, a connection that she hadn't felt in years, and it both thrilled and frightened her. Over the next few weeks, they met almost every evening. Sometimes at cafes, other times walking along the waterfront or simply talking over the phone. Each encounter deepened the subtle intimacy between them. Loveth found herself laughing more freely, feeling emotions she had long suppressed. Gabriel, for his part, remained a mystery. He shared enough to intrigue her but not enough to reveal his full intentions, and that ambiguity both captivated and unnerved her. One evening, after a long walk through the illuminated streets of Lagos Island, Gabriel took her hand. "Loveth," he said gently, "I like you. More than I expected. I want to see where this could go if you're willing." Loveth's heart raced. She had not expected these words. Her 20s had taught her to be cautious, to measure every interaction, but now in her 30s, desire and longing overrode calculation. She nodded, a smile breaking across her face, and for the first time in years, allowed herself to feel hope. But life, as Lagos had taught her, rarely offered clarity. As the days turned into weeks, their relationship deepened, yet subtle signs began to unsettle her. Gabriel's phone would sometimes ring late at night, messages received that he quickly deleted. Occasionally, he would become distant, lost in thought, without explanation. Loveth tried to ignore these signs, clinging instead to the moments of warmth and connection that made her feel alive again. Then, one quiet morning, she discovered she was pregnant. The news hit her like a tidal wave, bringing a rush of joy mixed with panic. She would be a mother, she thought, a new life forming within her. And yet, fear crept in, the fear of telling Gabriel, the fear of his response, and the nagging memory of all her past choices that had led her to this point. When she finally summoned the courage to tell him, she found him at their usual cafe, sipping coffee and reading a book. Her hands trembled as she sat down, placing her fingers over his. "Gabriel, I'm pregnant," she said, her voice a mixture of hope and anxiety. Gabriel's eyes widened, but not in the way she expected. There was a pause, a tense silence that seemed to stretch into eternity. Then slowly he pulled back. "Pregnant? Are you sure it's mine?" His tone was suspicious, questioning. Loveth's heart sank. She had expected excitement, perhaps fear, but not doubt. I'm sure," she whispered, feeling a wave of despair wash over her. Gabriel shook his head, his expression hardening. "Loveth, I've had my suspicions. I don't think you're faithful. I can't." And before she could respond, he left, disappearing into the bustling streets of Lagos without looking back. Loveth sat frozen, the cafe around her blurring into a haze. The city, once so full of possibilities, now seemed indifferent, cruel even. She had hoped for love, for security, for the comfort of someone who could finally understand her, but instead she was left with doubt, heartbreak, and an uncertain future. In the following days, the reality of her situation settled in. She was alone, pregnant, and faced with the consequences of choices made in both her 20s and 30s. Friends offered support, but there was no replacing the absence of Gabriel, no undoing the betrayal and doubt that now colored her life. As she sat by the window each evening, watching the Lagos skyline flicker with lights, Loveth reflected on her journey. Beauty and charm had once opened every door, yet they had not prepared her for the trials of life. The men she had dismissed in her youth, the older men she had chased, all had moved on, leaving her to face the truth. That time, choices, and desire are not always in our control. The city moved on, indifferent to her heartbreak, and Loveth realized that she too must find a way to move forward. But the lessons were bitter, the pain sharp, and the uncertainty looming. She had tasted both love and loss, and the road ahead would demand resilience she had never known she possessed. And as she cradled her growing belly, she knew that the story of her life was far from over, Yet the shadow of regret and betrayal would linger long after the city lights faded. The days after Gabriel's disappearance were a blur of confusion and pain. Loveth felt as though the city she once ruled with effortless grace had turned its back on her. Lagos, with all its noise and relentless motion, suddenly felt louder, colder, and overwhelmingly indifferent. She woke each morning to an empty apartment, the silence swallowing her whole. Even the sunlight that filtered through her curtains seemed dimmer, as if refusing to comfort her. At first, she convinced herself that Gabriel would come back. He would call, explain, apologize. Maybe he was just overwhelmed. Maybe he needed time. She clung to that hope like a lifeline, checking her phone every few minutes, jumping at every vibration, even when it was just a delivery message or a random broadcast from a church group. But the days passed. Then a week. Then two. And with every sunrise it became clear. Gabriel wasn't coming back. Saad came often, sometimes with food, sometimes just to sit in silence with her. "Love, you can't let this thing destroy you," she said one afternoon, gently rubbing her friend's back. Loveth nodded, but her eyes were distant. I trusted him, Saad. For the first time in years I trusted someone. And he made me feel like a fool." "You're not a fool," Saad insisted. "You're human. You wanted love. That's not a crime." But Loveth wasn't convinced. The weight of her past, the men she had turned away, the choices she had made for attention, the pride that once shielded her, pressed down on her like a physical burden. She had believed she would always have time, always have options, always have the upper hand. Now, she felt like a woman standing in the ruins of her own decisions. Evenings were the hardest. The city lights glimmered across the lagoon, and Loveth would watch them from her window, feeling as though each flickering bulb mocked her. Families walked together, lovers shared quiet conversations, and she felt the stark contrast of her solitude. She placed a hand on her growing belly. Her emotions a tangled knot of fear, anger, and aching tenderness. One night, after crying herself to sleep, Loveth dreamed of her younger self, 24, radiant, confident, walking through a mall with heads turning left and right. In the dream, she approached her younger version and tried to warn her, tried to tell her not to waste her time, not to chase temporary thrills, not to dismiss good men with humble hearts. But her younger self simply tilted her head, smirked, and walked away. Loveth woke breathless, heart pounding, her pillow wet with tears. It wasn't just Gabriel who had hurt her. She had hurt herself long before he ever entered her life. One morning, determined to escape the suffocating quiet of her apartment, Loveth dressed and took a walk through Lekki Phase 1. She passed couples jogging, parents pushing strollers, teenagers laughing on their way to school. The world continued, unbothered, unmoved. At the market, she bought fruits and vegetables, avoiding the curious eyes of women who whispered softly among themselves. "Is that not Loveth? She used to be so popular. She still looks beautiful, but something seems off. She's pregnant, ABI?" The murmurs felt like daggers. She paid quickly and walked away, her heart pounding with humiliation. Once, she had been the topic of admiration. Now she was the subject of pity, or worse, judgment. Later that day, she ran into John, the same John she had mockingly dismissed in her 20s. He was older now, more mature, with a quiet confidence she barely recognized. He was holding hands with a beautiful young woman, perhaps in her mid-20s. "Loveth," he said in surprise. She forced a smile. "John. Long time." He nodded politely, but there was a distance in his eyes, a distance she had once inflicted on him. "Yeah. It's been years." The woman beside him rested her head on his shoulder, smiling up at him. John gently squeezed her hand. "This is Tolu," he introduced. Loveth swallowed hard. "Nice to meet you." Tolu smiled warmly. "I've heard about you. John said you used to be very popular back then." Loveth's chest tightened. "Yes, something like that." They talked briefly, light conversation, nothing deep. But every second felt like a mirror held up to her past mistakes. When they finally walked away, Loveth stood frozen, watching them disappear into the crowd, the image of the life she had once taken for granted. That evening when she returned home, the loneliness hit harder than ever. She slumped onto the couch, her groceries untouched. The silence pressed on her chest like a weight. For the first time she whispered out loud, "God, what have I done?" Her voice cracked, the words echoing softly in the empty room. That night, she sat on the floor of her living room, surrounded by old photos, old memories, old mistakes. She flipped through images of herself, glowing, youthful, carefree. But she no longer saw herself as a goddess. She saw a girl who was running from her fears, using beauty as a shield, attention as a distraction. She began journaling, writing down everything she had never admitted aloud. Her regrets, her desires, her fears about motherhood, her shame, her longing for a second chance. The more she wrote, the more the emotional fog began to lift. Pain remained, but clarity began to form. The next morning she made a decision. Quiet one. Brave one. She would not allow her past to define her future. She reached out to her mother's sister, Aunt Amaka, a woman she had avoided due to her strict opinions. When Loveth told her everything about Gabriel, the pregnancy, the heartbreak, her aunt took a long breath. "My daughter," she said gently, "you cannot change yesterday, but you can use it. Pain is a teacher. Let it teach you, not destroy you." Loveth broke down in tears. For the first time since Gabriel left, she felt held. Not by a man, not by admiration, but by someone who wanted nothing from her. Over the next few weeks, with her aunt's guidance, Loveth began to rebuild. She attended prenatal appointments. She took morning walks. She ate healthier. She began a small online business selling scented candles, something she had once dismissed as beneath her. But now it felt empowering. Slowly, painfully, she began to rediscover herself. However, unknown to her, the storm was far from over. Gabriel had left scars that would not fade easily. And life, though improving, was preparing to test her in ways she had not yet imagined. And as her belly grew and the city lights flickered beyond her window, Loveth sensed it. Another turning point was coming. One that would either break her completely, or shape her into someone stronger than she had ever been. The sun was sliding down Lagos' dusty skyline the day Loveth realized she had finally reached the edge of herself. The world felt heavy, louder, faster than her heart could keep up with. She stood by the window of her small apartment, staring at the road where life seemed to be moving for everyone, except her. But life had one more lesson waiting. A lesson she could not outrun. Days turned into weeks, and Loveth found herself sinking into a strange, quiet determination. She didn't know where the strength came from. Maybe from pain, maybe from desperation, but she knew she had to change something. Anything. She began small. Very small. Cleaning her room. Washing her clothes. Cooking simple meals because the baby growing inside her needed strength, even if she didn't feel strong. She forced herself to walk outside even when shame clung to her like a shadow. She avoided faces she knew too well. She avoided memories even better. But you cannot run forever. Not from the world, not from your past, not from your choices. One afternoon, on her way back from the small clinic where she had gone for a checkup, she ran into someone she never thought she would see again. John. The same John who once adored her. The same John she once dismissed like air. The same John who now looked at her with a mixture of surprise and something almost like pity. He stood by the side of the road, holding a small nylon bag. He had grown, stronger, broader, calmer. Life had clearly been kind to him. "Loveth," he said, blinking hard, almost unsure. Loveth froze. The road suddenly felt like a trap. Her heart hammered with embarrassment. Hello, John," she whispered. He glanced at her belly. Round now, impossible to hide. "I didn't know you were expecting." Loveth swallowed hard. There were 1,000 possible replies, but none came out. "I hope you're fine, Shaw," he added softly. And that softness broke her. She wasn't fine. She hadn't been fine in a very long time. But she nodded anyway. "Yes, I'm managing." John hesitated, opened his mouth like he wanted to say more, but then he simply nodded and stepped away with a polite smile. "Take care of yourself," he said before walking off. Loveth stood there long after he disappeared. Her eyes burned. She wanted to cry. She wanted to scream. She wanted to run. But all she could do was breathe. Slowly, painfully. That night, she lay on her bed staring at the ceiling. She replayed the meeting over and over. She remembered the way John used to follow her around school. She remembered how she mocked him in front of her friends. She remembered how he once carried her books joyfully even when she didn't ask him. She remembered. And for the first time she regretted. Deeply. Honestly. Painfully. Not because she wanted John back, but because she wished she had been kinder. To him, to herself, to her future. The next morning, Loveth woke up with a kind of clarity she hadn't felt in years. She couldn't change her past. She couldn't undo the mistakes. She couldn't force love to come back. But she could build something new. Slowly, carefully, bravely. She found a small job at a sewing shop not too far from her house. The owner, Mama Rebecca, was a firm woman with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue, but she allowed Loveth to work part-time. The work was slow, the pay was small, but the dignity it brought was priceless. Loveth learned to stitch hems, fix buttons, and fold wrappers neatly. Every day she walked to work with her growing belly, and every day she whispered to the child inside her, "We will be okay. I don't know how yet, but we will be okay." And slowly, her life began taking shape again. But life is never straight, especially not in Lagos. 2 months after she started working, Gabriel returned. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon. The sky was dark with rain clouds, and the wind carried the smell of an oncoming storm. Loveth was sweeping the shop entrance when a shadow fell across the door. She lifted her head, and her heart nearly stopped. Gabriel. He looked different. Rougher. Thinner. His eyes restless. "Loveth," he breathed. She froze. A cold shock ran through her body. "What are you doing here?" she asked quietly. He stepped closer. "I've been looking for you." "Why?" He ran his hand through his hair, his voice trembling. I made a mistake. I didn't know what I was doing. I was scared. I'm sorry, Loveth." Loveth blinked, confused. Angry. "Sorry," she whispered. "Gabriel, you disappeared. You denied the pregnancy. You left me alone. I know. And I regret it. I want to make things right. Me come back. Let me take care of you." Loveth stared at him long and hard. In the past, this moment would have been her salvation. She would have jumped at the chance. She would have grabbed him with both hands. But now, something inside her had changed. "What exactly do you want, Gabriel?" she asked. "I want us to be a family." "Why?" He hesitated. "Loveth, I don't know. I miss you." She felt a painful, quiet pity rise in her. The old Loveth would have taken whatever love was offered, even if it came with lies. But she wasn't that Loveth anymore. "You didn't come because you love me," she said softly. "Loveth, you came because your life is falling apart and you think I'm an easy place to land." His eyes widened in shock. "You came because you think I'm desperate." Gabriel's silence was the loudest confession. Loveth nodded slowly. Her voice trembled, but her heart felt strangely steady. "Gabriel, I forgive you, but you cannot come back." He took a step toward her. "Loveth, please. Go," she said gently. "Before the rain starts." Rain clouds cracked open above them, and thunder rolled in the distance. Gabriel stood there for a long minute, searching her face for the girl he used to play with. But she was gone. Loveth turned away and went back into the shop. Her hands trembled. She fought tears. But she did not call him back. For the first time in her life, she chose herself. Months passed. Her belly grew heavier. Her steps slowed. And then one windy harmattan morning, she went into labor. The hours that followed were long, painful, terrifying. Thaw's scream echoed through the tiny room where Mama Rebecca and a midwife helped her deliver. Sweat poured from her body. Tears streamed down her face. Her hands shook. But in the middle of all the pain came a small, sharp cry. Her baby. A girl. Loveth held the tiny child in her trembling arms and kept under something she thought she would never feel again. Oh. She named the baby Amarachi. God's grace. Life did not magically become perfect after that. Loveth still struggled. Money was still tight. Nights were still good. But slowly she grew into a new life. A life she built with humility, hard work, and the wisdom of painful lessons. And every time she held her daughter, she whispered, "You will grow with love. You will grow with guidance. You will grow with wisdom. And you will never, ever walk the road I walked." Loveth's story did not end in perfection, but it ended in growth, in reality and redemption. And somehow that's the kind of ending life gives. A new beginning hidden inside a painful ending. If you enjoyed this story and want more powerful African tales filled with wisdom, drama, mystery, and real-life lessons, don't forget to subscribe African Folktales by Kate, where every story touches the soul.